You've been lied to about healing. They told you time fixes everything, that distractions will make the pain fade, that if you just keep moving forward, the scars will disappear. But if that were true, why do old wounds still whisper at night? Why do memories still sting when no one else can see? Why do you still carry a weight in your chest, heavy and invisible, as if peace was always one step out of reach? The truth is, healing doesn't come from forgetting. It doesn't come from forcing yourself to move on. Real healing begins when you stop running, when you turn inward and discover the timeless wisdom the Buddha left behind. Teachings that don't just cover the pain, but dissolve it at its roots. Teachings that bring silence to the storm in your mind and clarity to the confusion in your heart. For centuries, monks and seekers have walked this path. They found freedom not by escaping suffering, but by transforming it into compassion, wisdom, and peace. Tonight, as you listen, you'll step onto that same path. Slowly, the noise in your head will soften, the tightness in your body will loosen, and the wounds you thought would always ache will begin to mend. This is not just another bedtime story. This is a doorway to stillness, to clarity, to a calm so deep it feels like coming home. When morning comes, you won't just feel rested, you'll feel lighter, freer, more at peace with yourself and the world. Are you ready? Then close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let us begin. The night grows deeper and the mind begins to quiet. The stories you've carried all day start to rise to the surface. Memories of hurt, words left unsaid, that lingering sense that something inside is unfinished. Healing feels impossible when the heart whispers, "I am alone in this." Yet the truth is far softer, far more liberating. Beneath every fear, beneath every wound, lies a truth the Buddha revealed. Nothing is separate. The pain you hold, the breath in your chest, the stars above your window, all are threads of the same fabric. And when you see this clearly, isolation begins to loosen its grip. Tonight, let us walk gently into that truth. Emptiness is one of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism. People hear the word and think it means life is hollow, meaningless, or cold. But the Buddha never meant that. Emptiness is not a denial of life. It is the unveiling of life's deepest connection. It means that nothing exists on its own, nothing stands isolated, everything arises through causes and conditions. Just as a flower cannot bloom without soil, water, and sunlight, your very existence depends on countless unseen hands, the food you ate today, the air you breathe, the language that shapes your thoughts. When you begin to notice this interdependence, the illusion of being cut off dissolves. Much of emotional suffering comes from the sense that we are separate, that no one truly understands, that our pain is ours alone. Loneliness feeds on this belief, whispering that you are trapped inside your own private world. But emptiness shows you otherwise. When you feel abandoned, you are not an isolated island, you are part of a vast ocean of being. Every person who has ever lost, who has ever cried, who has ever longed for peace shares in your experience. Seeing this doesn't make the pain vanish instantly, but it changes its weight. Instead of being a prison, it becomes a bridge. Consider grief. When someone you love is gone, the mind screams that a part of you has been cut away. Emptiness teaches that even in loss, connection remains. The body of your loved one may no longer be here, but the kindness they gave you, the memories you hold, the way their presence shaped you, those are interwoven into the very fabric of your being. They live on in the choices you make, in the lessons you carry forward, in the compassion you extend to others. Grief softens when you see it is not a wall of separation, but a reminder of the ties that can never be broken. When you study emptiness, you also uncover a profound freedom. Because nothing exists on its own, everything is in constant change. The sadness that feels permanent is not fixed. It arose from conditions, and with time and awareness, it can fade as new conditions arise. Think of the sky. Clouds may cover it, but the openness is always there behind them. Your mind is the same. The heavy emotions that seem unmovable are passing weather. Emptiness reveals this truth. No state of mind, no wound, no fear is solid. Everything is fluid. Everything can change. But this truth must be experienced, not just thought about. The Buddha often pointed to the breath as the simplest way to see emptiness. Notice how you cannot breathe without the trees, without the air, without the cycle of nature that sustains you. Even the act of inhaling is proof that you are not separate. Each breath ties you to the world around you. You cannot exist independently, and that is not a weakness, it is liberation. Now consider anger. When someone hurts you, anger feels sharp, as if you are split from the world, cast into opposition. But when you see through emptiness, anger begins to dissolve. You notice that the person who hurt you was also shaped by conditions, their upbringing, their pain, their ignorance. Just as your anger arises from the conditions of your wound, their actions arose from causes you may not see. This does not excuse cruelty, but it frees you from the story that you were singled out by fate. You see the wider web of causes, and compassion arises naturally. Jealousy, too, begins to crumble under the light of emptiness. When you feel inferior, as if someone else has taken what should be yours, you are caught in the illusion of separation. You think their success exists apart from you, as if life is a competition of isolated beings. But when you see interdependence, you realize their joy, their achievements, their beauty are not thieves of your worth. They are expressions of conditions, just as you are. Their success can even ripple into your life, inspiring growth, offering lessons, awakening gratitude. The more deeply you see emptiness, the less you cling to rigid identities. How often do we imprison ourselves with the words, "I am broken," "I am unworthy," "I am my pain"? These labels feel solid, but they are not. They are momentary thoughts, built from memories, shaped by circumstances. Emptiness shows that who you are is not fixed. It is fluid, spacious, open. You are not bound to yesterday's wounds. Each moment holds the seed of becoming. Science has even begun to echo what the Buddha saw centuries ago. Neuroscience shows that the brain is plastic, constantly reshaping itself based on new experiences. Every time you meditate, every time you meet pain with kindness, you are rewiring pathways in your mind. Emptiness is not a mystical idea, but a lived reality. The very cells of your body are in constant exchange with the environment, replacing themselves, transforming. You are not the same being you were a year ago, not even the same being you were yesterday. When you let this truth sink in, a certain softness arises. You no longer hold on so tightly to your wounds because you see they are not eternal. You no longer cling desperately to joy because you know it too will change. Instead, you rest in the flow of life. This resting is clarity. This resting is peace. Yet, emptiness does not mean detachment from life. It means intimacy with life. When you realize nothing stands alone, you also realize that everything matters. Every small act of kindness, every word spoken, every breath taken ripples outward, touching the whole. Your life is not meaningless, it is infinitely connected. To harm another is to harm yourself. To heal yourself is to heal the world. So how do we practice this teaching? Begin by noticing connections in your daily life. When you drink tea, pause and realize the leaves came from distant soil, grown by hands you may never meet, nourished by rains that fell from clouds, harvested, packaged, carried across oceans so you could hold this warm cup tonight. Suddenly, something ordinary becomes a revelation of interdependence. Suddenly, gratitude blossoms. When emotional pain arises, trace it back. Ask, where did this come from? You will see layers, your memories, your culture, your family, the stories you've told yourself. None of them stand alone, none of them are unchangeable, and in that realization, the pain begins to lose its sharpness. The Buddha compared emptiness to a raft. You use it to cross the river of suffering, but once you've crossed, you don't carry it on your back. You let it go. In the same way, you don't cling to the idea of emptiness itself. You use it to free yourself. You see through separation, and in that seeing, the heart opens. Think of how the body heals a wound. The cut feels like an isolated injury, but the entire system, blood, skin, immune cells, works together to restore balance. In the same way, when you embrace emptiness, you allow the whole of existence to help heal your emotional wounds. You are not doing it alone. You never were. As you lie here, let the breath remind you, you belong. You are part of a vast, interconnected web. The loneliness you feel is not the truth of who you are. It is only a passing cloud. The truth is deeper, more spacious. The truth is that you are never separate. The truth is that you are already whole. And as this realization settles in your heart, you begin to notice something shift. The weight grows lighter, the wound less raw. There is space now where there was only tightness before. A space where compassion can flow in, where peace can grow, where clarity can shine, like the first light of dawn breaking through the dark. This is the healing power of emptiness, not coldness, not nothingness, but the gentle unveiling of the truth, that you are connected to everything, that your pain is not permanent, that your being is not fixed. From this place, healing begins not as a distant promise, but as a living reality in this very breath. When the truth of emptiness settles in the heart, the weight of isolation begins to loosen. Yet the journey of healing does not end there. Knowing that everything is connected is powerful. But what about the emotions that still rise like storms? Anger that burns hot in the chest, grief that floods the heart, jealousy that corrodes joy. These feelings may not vanish simply because we see their impermanent nature. The next step is learning how to meet them, how to turn them into something that nourishes instead of destroys. This is the path of transformation, the alchemy of the mind. At the center of Buddhist wisdom lies the teaching that even the most painful emotions can be used as fuel for awakening. They are not enemies to be fought against or buried beneath layers of distraction. They are raw materials. Just as ancient alchemists sought to turn lead into gold, the Buddha taught that we can turn anger into clarity, grief into compassion, jealousy into wisdom. This practice is not about suppression or denial. It is about harnessing the very energy of suffering and transmuting it into something liberating. Anger, when left unchecked, can feel like fire tearing through the heart. It blinds, consumes, and leaves behind ash. But fire is not only destructive, it also warms, protects, and transforms. When met with mindfulness, anger reveals itself as a deep yearning for justice, for care, for recognition. Beneath every outburst lies a wound, a place where love was denied or harm was inflicted. By looking closely at anger without judgment, we begin to hear the hidden message: something valuable has been threatened. Instead of letting it control us, we can use this awareness to act with strength that is guided by compassion rather than by rage. One way to practice this transformation is through slowing down in the very heat of the moment. When anger rises, the body signals it tightened jaw, racing heartbeat, heat in the face. By pausing and observing these sensations, you create space between the stimulus and your reaction. In that space, anger is no longer a master, but a messenger. You can ask, what is this anger protecting? Often, it is love. Love for fairness, love for dignity, love for connection. When you identify the love at the root, Anger shifts from blind fire to illuminating flame. Grief too can overwhelm. It is the heavy tide that pulls you under, the echo of emptiness left by loss. Yet grief is also proof of love. If there were no love, there would be no grief. By recognizing grief as a reflection of connection, the pain becomes a doorway into compassion for all beings who experience loss. Rather than shrinking the heart, grief can expand it. The tears we shed for those we lose become rivers flowing into the great ocean of shared humanity. When grief is approached with mindfulness, it becomes tender instead of crushing. The practice is not to force yourself to move on or to silence the ache, but to sit with it gently, breathing with it, allowing it to speak. You may notice that grief softens into gratitude the sorrow for someone gone entwines with the appreciation for having known them at all. Gratitude does not erase grief, but it transforms its sharp edges into something bearable, something even beautiful. In this way, grief becomes a teacher, guiding you to cherish impermanence and to love more deeply while love is present. Jealousy often hides in the shadows, gnawing at self-worth. It whispers that others' joy diminishes your own, that their success exposes your failures. Left unexamined, jealousy poisons relationships and corrodes inner peace. But jealousy is not inherently evil, it is a distorted mirror of longing. At its core, jealousy reveals desire for qualities you value, for growth you crave, for fulfillment you seek. By examining jealousy with mindfulness, it turns from envy into aspiration. You see not what you lack, but what you yearn to cultivate within yourself. Instead of resenting another's achievements, you can let them inspire you. Their success becomes a reminder of possibility, proof that growth is attainable. When jealousy is transformed in this way, it gives rise to mudita, or sympathetic joy, the ability to delight in the happiness of others. This joy is boundless, for unlike material wealth, joy multiplies when shared. Where jealousy contracts the heart, mudita expands it. The alchemy of emotions rests on one principle: no state of mind is fixed. Just as emptiness reveals that all phenomena arise from conditions, this practice shows that emotions too are fluid energies. Suppression freezes them, indulgence inflames them, but transformation releases their deeper potential. Each difficult feeling holds a seed of wisdom. Anger contains clarity about boundaries and justice. Grief holds the key to compassion and gratitude. Jealousy hides the spark of aspiration and the capacity for joy. This transformation requires patience and courage. It is easier to push emotions away or to let them take over than to sit with them mindfully. But sitting is the crucible of alchemy. By breathing with discomfort, you allow it to show you what lies beneath. The practice is not glamorous, it is often slow, raw, humbling. Yet with each encounter, you build resilience. You learn that emotions do not need to dictate your life. You learn to shape them into guides instead of chains. Stories from Buddhist tradition often highlight this path. One tale tells of a monk who was tormented by anger toward a rival. Instead of suppressing it, he meditated on the energy itself, observing how it surged and burned. Over time, he saw that his anger was fueled by pride and fear of rejection. When he acknowledged these roots, compassion arose for himself and for his rival, who carried his own suffering. The fire of anger cooled into clarity, and the monk became known for his patience. Modern psychology echoes these teachings. Cognitive reappraisal, a method studied in emotional regulation, shows that how we frame an experience changes how we feel it. Anger reframed as protection of love softens. Grief reframed as evidence of connection becomes bittersweet. Jealousy reframed as inspiration opens possibility. The Buddha's alchemy anticipated what science now confirms. The mind has the power to reshape its experience. Meditation practices support this transformation. Metta, or loving-kindness meditation, directs goodwill toward oneself and others. easing anger and jealousy. Tonglen, the Tibetan practice of breathing in suffering and breathing out relief, allows grief to be shared and softened. These practices do not erase emotions but weave them into the broader fabric of compassion. Turning poison into medicine also requires honesty. To acknowledge anger, grief, and jealousy without shame is itself an act of healing. Shame is the silent companion of many emotions, convincing us we should not feel as we do. But the Buddha never condemned emotions, he invited awareness of them. By meeting them without judgment, you reclaim their energy for growth. Daily life offers countless opportunities for this practice. When anger rises in traffic, notice it, breathe, and ask what it protects, perhaps the wish for safety. When grief surfaces at the memory of a loved one, let the tears fall, and then whisper gratitude for their presence in your life. When jealousy stings at a friend's success, pause and let it become fuel for your own aspirations while wishing them joy. Each small moment of transformation builds the habit of mindful alchemy. The more you practice, the less frightening emotions become. You realize they are not enemies waiting to ambush you, but teachers arriving with lessons. The heart becomes spacious, able to hold both pain and beauty. You no longer fear suffering because you know it can be used. This is freedom, not the absence of pain, but the mastery of turning pain into wisdom. As the night deepens and the body rests, let this truth settle. Your emotions are not obstacles to healing. They are the very path. Anger can guide you to boundaries and justice. Grief can open you to compassion and gratitude. Jealousy can lead you to growth and joy in the happiness of others. Nothing within you is wasted. Nothing is beyond transformation. When the poisons of the heart are met with awareness, they cease to poison. They become medicine, potent, healing, liberating. This is the power of mindful alchemy, the art of turning even the darkest storms into light. And in that light, you begin to see not only the possibility of peace, but the certainty that it is already within you, waiting to be uncovered. When anger softens into clarity, when grief opens into compassion, when jealousy becomes aspiration, a new space appears inside. It is quieter, more honest. Yet in that silence, another truth begins to surface. The hardest wounds are not always about others. Often, the deepest suffering comes from the way we treat ourselves. The harsh voice inside, the endless comparisons, the shame for not being enough. We may forgive others long before we forgive ourselves. And here is where the next step of healing begins. Learning to bring loving kindness not only to the world, but to the parts of ourselves we dislike, reject, or fear. The practice of metta, or loving kindness, is often spoken of as radiating goodwill outward. May all beings be happy, may all beings be free. But the Buddha also taught that this kindness must begin at home. To extend warmth to others while despising yourself is like trying to light a lamp with no flame. The heart cannot give what it refuses to hold. Metta toward the self is not arrogance or self-indulgence. It is the simple recognition that you, too, are worthy of compassion, even in your most imperfect forms. Many people recoil from this idea. They say, "But I do not deserve kindness. I have failed too often. I have hurt others. I am weak." The mind clings to a shadow image, a collection of mistakes and flaws, and calls it the self. This shadow feels like a permanent enemy. Yet Buddhist wisdom teaches that even these qualities are not fixed. Just as emptiness reveals the fluid nature of all things, metta reveals that every part of you, even the most despised, is capable of transformation. To begin this practice, you must first be willing to see the parts you usually avoid. The impatience that embarrasses you, the envy that burns quietly, the fear that makes you shrink back. These are the aspects that beg for kindness. To push them away only drives them deeper. To scold them only makes them grow stronger in the dark. But when you turn toward them with gentleness, something begins to shift. The critic softens when it is no longer fighting. The fear lessens when it is held instead of denied. Metta for the self you dislike begins with simple phrases. Traditional practice uses words such as, "May I be safe," "May I be healthy," "May I be at peace." At first, the words may feel false, even painful. The mind resists, saying, "I don't deserve this." That resistance is part of the practice. The phrases are not magic spells, they are seeds. Each time you repeat them, you are planting the possibility of kindness in soil that has been barren for too long. Over time, the heart begins to accept what the mind rejects. It is important to understand that metta is not about denying accountability. To send love to the parts of yourself that have caused harm does not mean excusing them. It means refusing to abandon them. A child who misbehaves does not need exile, they need guidance. In the same way, the shadow parts of your being need attention, direction, and care. When held in loving kindness, even your flaws become teachers, showing you where healing is most needed. This practice is deeply linked to trauma. Many people carry inner voices shaped by past criticism, neglect, or abuse. These voices repeat, "You are worthless, you are unlovable." Metta interrupts that cycle. By offering phrases of goodwill to yourself, you begin to replace the inner abuser with an inner ally. Neuroscience shows that repetition reshapes neural pathways. Each time you practice metta, you are rewiring the brain toward compassion. Slowly, the harsh voice loses its grip, replaced by a steadier, kinder tone. To make this practice effective, you can bring mindfulness to the body. Notice where self-criticism lives physically: a tightening in the chest, a sinking in the stomach, a heaviness in the throat. Place your hand there, breathe deeply, and silently offer kindness. May you be held. May you be free from suffering. Linking words with touch and breath helps anchor the practice beyond thought. The body begins to feel what the mind cannot yet believe. Metta also requires honesty about the parts of yourself you dislike most. It is tempting to direct kindness only toward the wounds that make you appear noble: sadness, insecurity, loneliness. But true healing demands that you also include the aspects you would rather hide: arrogance, selfishness, laziness, resentment. These are the places where metta works most powerfully. To send kindness to your fear is good. To send kindness to your pride is deeper. Because when you can hold even the qualities you despise, you cut through the illusion of being divided into good and bad selves. You begin to see the whole. Some teachers speak of this as embracing the shadow. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung described the shadow as the parts of the psyche we reject, bury, or project onto others. Buddhism and psychology converge here. What you resist within yourself does not disappear. It shapes your life unconsciously. Metta shines light on the shadow. By greeting it with kindness, you prevent it from ruling you in secret. One way to deepen this is through visualization. Sit quietly and bring to mind a version of yourself that you dislike, the self that failed, the self that lashed out, the self that feels shame. See this self as if it were sitting before you. Notice its posture, its face, its eyes. Then offer it the same phrases you would to a dear friend. May you be safe. May you be loved. May you be free from suffering. At first, this may feel strange, even impossible. But with repetition, the resistance softens. The shadow begins to receive the light. There is also a paradox here. When you send metta to the parts you dislike, they often change. Not because you forced them, but because you gave them the space to breathe. Anger that is met with kindness reveals its root in wounded love. Laziness, when held with compassion, often shows itself as exhaustion in need of rest. Even arrogance may soften into confidence when it is no longer rejected. What you feared as unchangeable becomes fluid once it is accepted. The practice also extends into daily life. Notice how often you criticize yourself in small ways, forgetting something, making a mistake, saying the wrong word. Instead of repeating the old pattern of scolding, pause and whisper kindness. It's okay. May I learn from this? May I be patient with myself? Each small moment builds the habit of self-compassion until it becomes second nature. This practice does not lead to selfishness. On the contrary, those who are kind to themselves are more capable of kindness toward others. When you are not at war with your own being, you no longer project that war onto the world. You stop demanding perfection from others, stop resenting their flaws, stop using them as mirrors for your own self-hatred. Metta for the self creates space for metta for all beings. Stories from Buddhist tradition remind us of this. There is a tale of a monk who despised his own body, seeing it as impure and shameful. He practiced metta for years, learning to direct kindness toward his very flesh. Over time, his hatred turned to gratitude. He saw the body not as an enemy, but as a vessel of practice, the very ground of his awakening. His compassion for himself radiated outward, and he became known for his gentleness toward all beings. Modern studies confirm this. Research on self-compassion shows that people who practice it are more resilient, less prone to anxiety and depression, and more capable of healthy relationships. Self-compassion reduces fear of failure and increases motivation, not because you pressure yourself, but because you support yourself. Just as a child learns best when encouraged, the self grows best under kindness. As you lie quietly, you can begin this practice now. Bring to mind something you dislike about yourself. Feel the resistance, the tightness, and then, softly, offer the words, "May I be free from suffering. May I be at peace." The words may not feel true at first. That does not matter. They are seeds. Plant them anyway. Water them with patience. Trust that over time, they will grow. This is the power of metta for the self you dislike. It does not erase your flaws or deny your mistakes. It does something greater. It teaches you to hold your whole being with gentleness, to see even the darkest parts as worthy of care. From this ground, true transformation becomes possible. Healing is not about cutting pieces of yourself away. It is about embracing yourself fully so that every part may find its rightful place. In this way, the practice of metta becomes a bridge between shadow and light. It frees you from the prison of self-hatred and opens the heart to its natural state of compassion. And as this compassion grows, you find yourself living with more patience, more forgiveness, more peace. The war within subsides, and what remains is a steady kindness that touches everything it meets. The night deepens, and the heart softens. The harsh voice fades, replaced by something quieter, more spacious. Loving kindness flows inward, filling the places once abandoned. And in that warmth, you begin to rest not as a perfect being, but as a whole one. When the practice of loving kindness begins to soften the sharp edges of self-criticism, the heart opens to a new layer of truth. Healing the relationship with yourself is profound, yet life will always place you in the presence of others. And it is there, in the push and pull of relationships, that the deepest wounds often reveal themselves. The people around you act as mirrors, reflecting back the patterns you carry, the karmic imprints left unresolved, the parts of yourself still hidden in shadow. What feels like conflict, betrayal, or irritation is often a message pointing directly to the places within that need light. This is the essence of the mirror approach, to use relationships not as battlegrounds, but as teachers. When you encounter someone who stirs anger, the first reaction is often to blame them entirely. Yet if you pause, you may notice that the intensity of your reaction arises not only from their behavior, but from something old inside you. A harsh word from them touches the memory of criticism from long ago. An act of neglect touches the residue of childhood abandonment. Without awareness, you lash out, believing the present moment is the sole cause of your pain. With awareness, you see that the other person has simply illuminated an old wound. The mirror does not create the scar, it shows you where it is. This perspective shifts the way you engage with relationships. Instead of asking, "Why is this person hurting me?" you begin to ask, "What is this situation reflecting back to me?" This is not about excusing harmful behavior. It is about reclaiming power. When you realize that much of your suffering comes from internal wounds awakened by external events, you are no longer trapped as a victim of others' actions. You can respond with clarity instead of blind reaction. The Buddha's teaching on karma helps to deepen this understanding. Karma is not punishment. It is the unfolding of patterns created by past actions, thoughts, and emotions. When someone's behavior stirs something in you, it may be activating karmic memory. The harshness you feel may be connected to unresolved anger, the jealousy to unresolved insecurity, the betrayal to a lingering fear of abandonment. These karmic imprints continue to shape your present until they are seen clearly. Relationships bring them to the surface precisely so they can be healed. One of the most powerful practices here is mindful observation. When you feel triggered by someone, pause and trace the feeling back. Ask yourself, where have I felt this before? The answer may surprise you. Often, the pain in relationships today echoes voices and experiences from childhood, where early impressions left deep marks. By identifying these roots, you begin to see the karmic chain that links the past to the present. And once you see it, you can begin to release it. Another important aspect is projection. What you judge harshly in others often points to qualities you have not accepted in yourself. For example, if laziness in another person infuriates you beyond reason, it may reflect your own fear of being unproductive or your hidden exhaustion. If arrogance enrages you, it may mirror your own suppressed pride or insecurity. The mirror does not lie, it shows what is hidden beneath the surface. By acknowledging this, you turn judgment into self-awareness. But awareness alone is not enough. The next step is choosing how to respond. When someone's actions trigger pain, you have a choice: react from the wound or respond from clarity. Reacting often means lashing out, withdrawing, or clinging. Responding means recognizing the wound, tending to it, and then engaging from a place of compassion. This does not mean tolerating abuse or staying in harmful relationships. It means using every interaction as an opportunity to grow in awareness and to free yourself from automatic patterns. The mirror approach also reveals positive truths. Just as negative traits in others can reflect unhealed wounds, positive traits can reflect your own hidden potential. When you admire someone's patience, kindness, or courage, it may be because those qualities also exist within you, waiting to be developed. Relationships, then, not only reveal wounds, but also awaken dormant strengths. The practice of gratitude is key here. When you see relationships as mirrors, even difficult ones, you begin to feel gratitude for the lessons they bring. A friend who triggers jealousy teaches you where to cultivate contentment. A partner who stirs fear of abandonment teaches you where to strengthen self-trust. A colleague who inspires admiration shows you qualities you can nurture. Gratitude shifts the heart from resentment to openness, making every connection an opportunity for growth. In Buddhist thought, the teaching of dependent origination explains that everything arises in relation. Just as no self exists independently, no relationship exists in isolation. Every interaction is part of a web of conditions shaped by both parties' histories, wounds, and intentions. To see relationships as mirrors is to recognize this web and to use it skillfully. Instead of reacting blindly, you observe, reflect, and act with awareness of the greater whole. Practical exercises can help cultivate this approach. One practice is journaling after conflicts. Write down the situation, your emotional reaction, and then ask, what part of me was touched? What earlier memory does this echo? How can I meet this part of myself with kindness? This process turns conflict into an opportunity for insight rather than bitterness. Another practice is silent contemplation during meditation. Bring to mind someone who triggers you. Notice the emotions that arise, the stories your mind tells. Then, instead of fueling those stories, sit with the raw sensation in the body, the tightness, the heat, the heaviness. Offer metta to that sensation. May this part of me be free from suffering. By doing so, you heal not through the other person changing, but through changing your relationship with your own wound. This path requires humility. It is easier to blame others than to face your own reflections. But the Buddha emphasized that liberation comes through self-knowledge. Every relationship is an invitation to deepen that knowledge. Even the most painful connections hold value if you use them to illuminate your blind spots. Over time, practicing this way transforms the quality of your relationships. You no longer cling to people to validate you or reject them to protect you. You engage with them as companions on the path, each one reflecting parts of yourself back to you. Conflicts become less threatening because you see them as opportunities. Love becomes deeper because it is not based on illusion, but on awareness. This approach also cultivates equanimity. By seeing both wounds and strengths reflected in others, you no longer swing wildly between idealization and hatred. You begin to hold others with balanced compassion, knowing they too are shaped by wounds and karmic patterns. You stop demanding perfection and start embracing reality. This does not mean you tolerate harm, but you meet it with clarity rather than confusion. As the night stretches on, let this truth settle. The world around you is a mirror. Every smile, every argument, every silence reflects something of your inner world. You cannot control the mirror, but you can choose how to look at it. You can use it to fuel resentment, or you can use it to awaken. The practice of seeing relationships as mirrors does not isolate you. It connects you more deeply. For when you recognize your wounds in the faces of others, you also recognize theirs in yours. Compassion arises naturally, not as an effort, but as a realization. And in that compassion, both you and those around you begin to heal. The journey continues, each step revealing more of the heart. The mirror does not flatter, nor does it condemn, it simply shows what is. And by seeing clearly, you walk the path of healing with honesty, courage, and love. When you begin to see relationships as mirrors, the world reveals not only the surface of interactions, but also the hidden roots beneath them. Every conflict, every attraction, every repeated pattern whispers of something older, carried silently through time. These are not random accidents. They are threads of memory woven into the fabric of the present. In Buddhist thought, this is karma, not fate carved in stone, but the momentum of past actions and emotions shaping today's responses. To understand karma in this way is to see that your emotional life is not only about what is happening now, but also about what has been left unresolved before. Karma as emotional memory is not about mystical punishment. It is about cause and effect in the most intimate sense. When a strong emotion arises and is not processed fully, it does not vanish. It settles into the mind and body like a residue. Later, when a similar situation appears, the residue stirs and colors your perception. A small disagreement may feel overwhelming because it awakens the memory of rejection. A slight criticism may feel unbearable because it echoes years of harsh judgment. In this way, the past continues to live in the present, repeating itself until it is brought into awareness. To see karma as emotional memory is to recognize that your present reactions are often disproportionate, not because you are weak or broken, but because they are carrying the weight of history. Each unresolved moment stacks upon the next, forming patterns that appear unshakable. Yet Buddhism teaches that these patterns are not permanent. With mindful attention, the karmic residue can be released, and new responses can be written. The first step is awareness. Most people live at the surface, blaming the present situation for their suffering without recognizing the older wound it awakens. Mindfulness invites you to pause and notice. When you feel anger flare or sadness overwhelm, instead of drowning in the story, you observe the sensation. You ask, what is being touched here? Where have I felt this before? The body often knows before the mind does. The tightening in the chest, the sinking in the stomach, the trembling in the throat. These signals point to older layers of experience. Once you begin to notice these layers, you create space between stimulus and reaction. Instead of being dragged by the old pattern, you can meet it with clarity. This is the rewriting of karma, seeing clearly where the pattern comes from, allowing the emotion to be felt without suppression, and choosing a different response. Each time you do this, the grip of the old memory weakens. Buddhist teachings often describe karma as seeds. Every thought, word, and deed plants a seed in the soil of consciousness. Some seeds grow quickly, others lie dormant for years. When conditions ripen, the seed sprouts. Emotional memory functions in the same way. A harsh word from decades ago may sprout suddenly when someone today speaks in a similar tone. The original seed was never uprooted, but awareness allows you to tend the garden differently. Instead of letting weeds overrun the soil, you learn to nourish seeds of compassion, patience, and wisdom. It is important to understand that karma is not fixed destiny. It is potential, shaped moment by moment. While the past influences the present, it does not dictate the future. Every moment of mindful awareness is a moment where new karma can be created. This is why meditation is so powerful. It interrupts the unconscious chain of reaction and replaces it with conscious choice. Consider anger. If anger arises and is expressed through harsh words, it plants seeds of more conflict, reinforcing the karmic pattern. If anger is suppressed, it plants seeds of resentment, also reinforcing the pattern. But if anger is observed, acknowledged, and then transformed into clear communication or compassionate action, it plants seeds of healing. The memory of anger is rewritten into a memory of strength and clarity. Over time, the old pattern dissolves. Grief follows the same principle. If grief is avoided, it hardens into numbness. If it is indulged without awareness, it can drown you. But when grief is held mindfully, when tears are allowed to flow and gratitude is remembered, it plants seeds of compassion for all who suffer loss. Each encounter with grief becomes an opportunity to soften rather than close. The karmic memory of loss is rewritten into the karmic memory of tenderness. Jealousy too can be reshaped. If jealousy is left unchecked, it breeds bitterness and rivalry. If denied, it festers in secret. But if jealousy is examined honestly, it reveals what you long for, and it can be transformed into motivation or joy in the happiness of others. This plants seeds of generosity and appreciation. Over time, what once poisoned relationships begins to nurture them. Mindful attention is the tool that allows this rewriting. It is not about forcing positivity or pretending wounds do not exist. It is about turning toward the raw feeling with presence. When you bring awareness to an old emotional memory, you release its grip. The mind no longer runs on autopilot. It begins to see choices where before there was only compulsion. The body holds much of this karmic memory. Trauma research shows that unresolved experiences are stored in physical sensations, tight muscles, shallow breath, restless tension. Buddhist meditation often begins with the body, because to release karmic patterns, you must release them not only in thought, but in sensation. Breathing into tightness, relaxing the body, and bringing kindness to areas of pain allows the emotional residue to dissolve gradually. Forgiveness plays a central role in transforming karma. Not forgiveness as passive tolerance, but forgiveness as release of the chain. When you hold on to resentment, you carry the karmic seed forward, reliving the injury again and again. Forgiveness is not about excusing the harm. It is about refusing to let the harm continue to shape your future. By letting go, you free yourself from repeating the same memory endlessly. Equally important is self-forgiveness. Many karmic patterns are fueled by guilt and shame for past actions. These emotions keep you bound to the past, replaying mistakes without resolution. To forgive yourself does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means acknowledging the harm, making amends if possible, and then planting new seeds through different choices. Self-forgiveness transforms guilt into learning, shame into humility, and regret into wisdom. Compassion naturally arises when you see karma as emotional memory. You realize that others, too, are reacting not only to the present, but to their unresolved past. The harsh person may be carrying years of unhealed wounds. The cold person may be protecting themselves from past betrayals. Recognizing this does not mean tolerating abuse, but it does open the heart to empathy. Instead of meeting hurt with hurt, you can meet it with understanding. This perspective also reduces self-blame. When you react strongly to a situation, it is not because you are weak, but because the old wound is deep. Seeing it as karmic memory allows you to meet yourself with patience. Just as physical scars take time to heal, so too do emotional scars. Each mindful moment is a step in the healing process. Practical exercises help make this real. One practice is to reflect at the end of the day. Where did I react strongly today? What past memory may have been touched? Can I bring kindness to that memory now? By tracing the chain back, you loosen its hold. Another practice is guided meditation, where you visualize the younger self who first experienced the wound. You sit with them, offer them compassion, and assure them they are safe now. This practice rewrites the emotional memory directly, integrating the past into a healed present. Over time, you begin to see life differently. Challenges are no longer random punishments, but opportunities to heal old patterns. Each trigger becomes a teacher. Each difficult emotion becomes an invitation to plant new seeds. Karma is no longer a burden dragging you down, but a path showing you where freedom is possible. This shift brings immense clarity. Instead of repeating the same cycles, you begin to act with wisdom. Instead of carrying resentment, you carry understanding. Instead of being bound by old pain, you are guided by new insight. The wheel of karma, once turning unconsciously, begins to turn in the direction of liberation. As you rest tonight, let this truth take root. You are not doomed to repeat the past. The patterns that bind you are not permanent. With mindful attention, every old wound can be rewritten into wisdom. Karma is not a prison, but a teacher. Emotional memory is not a curse, but a doorway. Step through it, and you will find that each moment holds the power to free you. When the weight of karmic memory begins to loosen, when old emotions are no longer chains but lessons, a new doorway quietly appears. The heart longs not for more analysis, not for more explanations, but for stillness. So much of suffering is fueled by words spoken in anger, words left unsaid, words replayed endlessly in the mind. Yet the deepest healing often arises in a space where words are set aside. In Buddhist practice, this is known as noble silence, a silence not of emptiness but of depth, where truth is revealed beyond the reach of intellect. Silence in this sense is not simply the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness unclouded by constant chatter. Most people live surrounded by noise, but the loudest noise is not external, it is the restless commentary of the mind. Thoughts argue, compare, judge, plan, regret. This mental noise drowns out the subtle wisdom of the heart. Noble silence interrupts this cycle. By resting in stillness, you allow what is hidden beneath the surface to rise without distortion. When you enter silence, you may first encounter discomfort. The mind resists, scrambling for words to fill the emptiness. Memories may rush in, emotions may surface. This is not a failure of practice, it is the practice itself. Silence acts like a mirror, showing you the root of pain without distraction. Instead of covering wounds with speech or thought, you face them directly. In that facing, clarity begins to form. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that insight is not reached by debate, but by direct experience. Words can point to truth, but they cannot contain it. Just as tasting a fruit is different from describing it, resting in silence allows you to experience healing directly. Pain that once felt overwhelming is seen clearly as transient sensation. Confusion that once seemed endless dissolves into spaciousness. What could not be solved by reasoning is softened by stillness. Periods of noble silence are woven into many Buddhist traditions. In monasteries, silence is practiced not only to avoid distraction, but to deepen presence. Without the constant exchange of speech, every action becomes more mindful: the way you walk, eat, breathe. This heightened attention reveals subtleties that are usually missed. You begin to notice how emotions arise and pass without needing words to justify them. The simple act of being becomes enough. Silence also reveals the roots of craving and aversion. When you are not speaking, you see more clearly how often speech is used to avoid discomfort. You may notice the impulse to complain, to gossip, to defend yourself, to seek approval. Without giving voice to these impulses, you watch them rise and fall. In that watching, their power fades. Silence is not repression, it is exposure. It exposes the hidden drivers of suffering so they can dissolve naturally. Modern life rarely allows such silence. Constant communication through devices, endless streams of information, and the pressure to respond quickly leave little room for stillness. Yet this makes noble silence more necessary than ever. Even short periods of silence can reset the nervous system, calm the mind, and reconnect you with deeper clarity. Research shows that silence lowers stress, reduces blood pressure, and increases creativity. What ancient teachers knew intuitively is now confirmed scientifically. Silence heals. The silence also carries a quality of compassion. When words are set aside, judgments soften. You stop rehearsing arguments, defending positions, or clinging to identities. You sit simply as you are, no longer performing. In that simplicity, self-acceptance grows. You realize you are not your roles, not your stories, not even your thoughts. You are the awareness beneath them, steady and vast. This recognition itself dissolves pain. To practice noble silence does not require retreat to a monastery. You can begin with moments in daily life. Choose one meal to eat without talking, focusing fully on taste, texture, breath. Set aside time each day to sit in quiet, observing the flow of thoughts without speaking them aloud. Spend part of a walk in silence, listening deeply to the sounds around you without commentary. These small practices build the habit of stillness, preparing the mind for deeper silence. When pain arises in silence, the key is to stay present. The mind may want to escape, but if you breathe and remain, you will see the pain shift. What once seemed solid reveals itself as a series of sensations, thoughts, and memories. By not speaking about it, you stop reinforcing the story. By not naming it, you allow it to dissolve in its own time. Silence strips away the labels, leaving only raw experience, which is less frightening than the stories woven around it. Noble silence is also deeply relational. In silent retreat, people often report feeling more connected to others, not less. Without words, communication shifts to presence, to subtle gestures, to shared awareness. You begin to sense the common humanity beneath the masks of speech. This shared silence nurtures compassion because it reveals that beneath all the words, every being longs for peace. The Buddha himself often remained silent when asked certain questions, especially those that could not lead to liberation. His silence was not avoidance, but teaching. By refusing to engage in endless speculation, he pointed disciples back to direct experience. The most profound truths, impermanence, suffering, interconnection, cannot be fully explained in language. They must be tasted in silence. Silence also prepares the ground for right speech. When you cultivate silence, the words you do speak carry more weight. They arise from clarity rather than compulsion. You speak less, but with more care. This transformation reduces conflict and deepens trust in relationships. In this way, silence is not against communication, it purifies it. The healing power of silence lies in its capacity to reveal what is already present. You do not need to add anything or chase anything. You only need to stop covering it with noise. Beneath the chatter, beneath the stories, lies a natural peace. It is not created, it is uncovered. Noble silence is the path to this uncovering. As you rest now, allow silence to spread through you. Let go of the need to label, to explain, to narrate. Let the body breathe, the mind settle. Notice how the absence of words feels. Notice what arises when you do not reach for explanation. Within this stillness, healing is already unfolding. Pain loses its solidity, clarity shines without effort, and the heart rests in its natural state of peace. In the silence beyond words, you do not need to be anyone or prove anything. You are simply present. And in that presence lies the deepest clarity, the kind that no book, no argument, no speech can give. It is the clarity of direct knowing, the peace of simply being. This is the gift of noble silence, to reveal the root of pain and to uncover the vast, quiet freedom that was always here. When silence is allowed to settle, when words no longer cloud perception, the mind begins to see more directly. In that stillness, another truth becomes unavoidable. Everything passes. The body shifts with every breath. Thoughts dissolve as quickly as they arise. Feelings change without warning. Yet the ego clings, grasping for permanence, trying to hold together a fixed sense of me. This grasping is the root of pride, fear, and attachment. The practice of facing impermanence with awareness, what can be called the mindful death of the ego, offers a way to loosen that grip. By letting small parts of the ego die each day, we learn to live with less fear and more freedom. Ego is not evil in itself. It is a function of survival. It organizes experience into I and mine, allowing the body and mind to navigate the world. But left unchecked, it builds illusions of control and permanence. It convinces you that your status, your possessions, your opinions, your very identity must remain fixed. When life inevitably changes, ego resists and suffering arises. Daily contemplation on impermanence gently erodes this illusion. It does not destroy the self, but reveals its fluid nature. One way to practice this is to reflect regularly on the fragility of the body. The Buddha often instructed disciples to contemplate that the body is subject to aging, sickness, and death, not to depress the mind, but to awaken clarity. When you remember that even this body will one day be gone, pride softens. The obsession with appearance or achievement loosens. Fear of loss diminishes, because loss is already understood as part of life. Each small recognition of impermanence is like a micro-death of the ego, dissolving the false belief in permanence. Daily experiences provide countless opportunities for this practice. When a thought arises and fades, notice it. That was a birth and death. When an emotion surges and then calms, observe it. Another birth and death. When you let go of an opinion, when you release a grudge, when you surrender the need to be right, the ego dies a little. These micro-deaths are not tragic, they are liberating. They prepare the mind to meet larger changes with equanimity. Attachment is one of the strongest expressions of ego. The mind clings to people, possessions, and roles as if they guarantee security. Yet everything you cling to will change. Relationships evolve, possessions decay, roles shift. By contemplating impermanence daily, you begin to hold lightly. You can still love, still care, still act responsibly, but without the desperation of clinging. This lightness is not detachment in the sense of coldness. It is freedom from the illusion that anything can be kept forever. Fear is also dissolved through this practice. Much fear is rooted in the denial of change. The ego fears death most of all because it threatens the illusion of a fixed self. But when you allow micro-deaths every day, letting go of pride, of control, of rigid identity, you train the mind to accept the larger truth. Death of the body then becomes part of the natural flow, not an enemy. Those who practice this deeply often face death with peace because they have already died many times in small ways. Pride, too, is softened through mindful death of the ego. Pride insists on being seen, being recognized, being superior. But when you reflect on impermanence, you see that all accomplishments, all recognition, all status are fleeting. Kings and beggars alike turn to dust. The ego that once shouted, "Look at me," begins to whisper, "All things pass." In this humility, compassion grows. Instead of seeking to dominate, you seek to serve. Instead of clinging to superiority, you embrace equality. Meditation practices can support this contemplation. One traditional practice is Maranasati, or mindfulness of death. Practitioners reflect daily on the certainty of death and the uncertainty of its timing. This reflection is not meant to create anxiety but to sharpen presence. When you know life is fragile, you stop wasting time on trivial resentments or endless distractions. You live more fully, with clarity about what matters. Another method is to notice impermanence in the smallest details. Watch how a candle flame flickers, how sounds arise and vanish, how breath enters and leaves. Each moment reveals transience. By resting attention here, the mind absorbs impermanence not as theory, but as direct perception. Slowly, the ego's illusion of permanence weakens. Modern psychology supports these insights. Studies show that awareness of mortality, when approached mindfully, increases gratitude, reduces materialism, and deepens meaning in life. Far from causing despair, facing death honestly often awakens vitality. This mirrors the Buddha's teaching. By facing impermanence, we free ourselves from the ego's desperate denial and open to authentic living. In daily life, micro-ego deaths appear as choices. You may choose to let someone else have the last word, releasing the ego's need to win. You may choose to forgive instead of holding a grudge, releasing the ego's need for superiority. You may choose to step back from constant self-promotion, releasing the ego's need for validation. Each of these choices is a small surrender, a rehearsal for the ultimate letting go. These practices do not erase individuality, they refine it. Without the distortions of pride, fear, and attachment, the self becomes a clearer channel for compassion and wisdom. You still act, speak, and love, but without the heavy burden of defending an illusion. You live more lightly, aware of the flow of birth and death in every moment. The mindful death of the ego also deepens connection with others. When you release the rigid sense of self, you see more clearly that others are not separate. Their joys and sorrows are intertwined with yours. Compassion arises naturally when the boundaries of ego soften. Fear of vulnerability decreases because you no longer need to protect a fragile self-image. You can meet others openly, honestly, tenderly. Contemplating impermanence daily brings profound clarity. Decisions are guided less by pride and more by wisdom. Relationships are held with more appreciation, knowing they will not last forever. Gratitude deepens because every moment is recognized as precious. Fear of change diminishes because change is no longer resisted but embraced as the natural rhythm of existence. As you rest now, let this truth settle into your heart. Everything is passing. Each breath rises and falls. Each thought appears and dissolves. Each moment is born and dies. The ego clings, but you can release. And in releasing, you do not lose, you gain freedom. Micro-deaths of the ego prepare you for the great death, not with terror but with peace. The mindful death of the ego is not a loss but a return to humility, to compassion, to the spacious awareness beneath all identities. It is the daily practice of letting illusions fade so that truth may shine. And in this truth, there is no fear, no pride, no desperate attachment, only the steady peace of one who knows that to die each moment is to live fully. When the grip of ego begins to loosen through daily reflections on impermanence, space opens for a wider perspective. The self no longer feels like a fortress that must always be defended, and the heart becomes more sensitive to the currents of suffering that extend beyond one lifetime. For many, the pain they carry is not only personal, it is woven from the struggles of parents, grandparents, and generations before. Trauma, fear, and silence often flow down family lines like rivers that never found release. Healing at this level requires a practice that is both intimate and vast, one that meets not only your own wounds but the echoes of those who came before. In Tibetan Buddhism, the practice of Tonglen offers such a path, breathing in suffering, breathing out relief, transforming inherited pain into compassion. Generational wounds are not always spoken aloud, yet they shape lives quietly. A parent who never learned how to express love may pass on distance. A grandparent who endured war or poverty may pass on fear of loss. Families often carry unhealed grief, shame, or anger, handing them down through behaviors, beliefs, and even silence. Modern science now affirms this, showing that trauma can leave marks not only in memory, but also in the nervous system and gene expression, patterns that ripple into future generations. What Buddhism intuited long ago is now being confirmed. Suffering is not isolated to one person. It is shared across time. Tonglen directly addresses this shared burden. The practice reverses the instinct of self-protection. Normally, when faced with suffering, the mind recoils, wanting to avoid it. Tonglen teaches the opposite, to breathe it in with courage, to touch it fully, and then to breathe out comfort, peace, and healing. This counterintuitive act transforms the relationship with pain. Instead of being poisoned by it, you become a channel for its transformation. Applying Tonglen to generational wounds deepens its power. As you breathe in, you take in not only your personal pain, but also the suffering carried by your family line. You acknowledge the silence, the hardships, the unspoken grief. With each out-breath, you send them relief, warmth, forgiveness, release. In this way, you do what perhaps no one in your lineage could do. You turn toward the wound with compassion instead of passing it forward. This practice does not mean you absorb harm into yourself. The breath is symbolic, it transforms. Breathing in suffering is not taking it into your identity. It is bringing it into the light of awareness where it can change. The out-breath is the active response, sending love where once there was only pain. In this exchange, the heart expands and inherited burdens begin to lift. A practical approach begins with awareness of what you have inherited. Sit quietly and reflect. What patterns run through your family? Is there recurring fear, anger, shame, or silence? Where do you notice echoes of these patterns in yourself? Identifying them is the first step. Once they are seen, they can be held with compassion. Begin Tonglen by breathing in the weight of that pattern, feeling its presence without resistance. Then breathe out release, sending healing backward and forward through the family line. This work is often emotional. Tears may come as you acknowledge what has long been denied. Grief may arise for ancestors who suffered in silence. Allow these feelings to flow. They are part of the healing. The practice is not about fixing history, but about transforming your relationship with it. By meeting inherited suffering directly, you free yourself and offer freedom to those who will come after you. One powerful aspect of Tonglen is that it expands empathy. When you breathe in the suffering of your family, you realize how much of their behavior was shaped by pain they could not resolve. A parent's harshness may be seen as the echo of their own wounds. A grandparent's silence may be understood as protection from trauma too heavy to speak. This recognition does not excuse harm, but it transforms judgment into understanding. In that understanding, forgiveness can grow naturally, not forced but arising from compassion. Science supports this kind of healing. Studies of intergenerational trauma show that cycles of pain can be interrupted when someone consciously processes emotions instead of repeating them. Tonglen offers a direct method for this. By holding suffering in awareness and transforming it through compassion, you interrupt the chain. The burden no longer passes unconsciously. It is met, transformed, and released. Another dimension of Tonglen for generational wounds is honoring resilience. Families pass down pain, but they also pass down strength. Survival, endurance, love, in small gestures, all of these flow alongside trauma. In Tonglen practice, you can breathe in not only suffering but also the memory of resilience, and breathe out gratitude. This balances the heart, preventing it from becoming overwhelmed by grief alone. The practice also affects how you relate to future generations. Whether you have children or not, your healing influences the world beyond you. Each time you meet inherited suffering with compassion, you change the energy that would otherwise be passed on. The cycle is interrupted, and what flows forward is lighter, freer. This is one of the most profound acts of service. Healing not only for yourself, but for those who will live after you. The process can be guided by ritual. Some practitioners light a candle for ancestors, acknowledging their presence before beginning Tonglen. Others place family photos nearby, bringing the lineage into awareness. These gestures help ground the practice, making it concrete. As you breathe in suffering and breathe out relief, you visualize it spreading across generations, touching those who came before and those yet to come. Silence supports Tonglen deeply. Without words, the practice becomes visceral. The breath carries suffering and relief beyond concepts, reaching places that language cannot touch. Many find that Tonglen practiced in silence has a profound effect on the nervous system, calming tension and opening the heart. There are challenges in this work. Facing generational wounds can awaken resistance or fear. The mind may whisper that the pain is too heavy, that it is not yours to carry. In such moments, remember that Tonglen is not about taking ownership of the wound. It is about transforming the relationship with it. The breath symbolizes your capacity to connect with suffering without being destroyed by it. Each breath out is a reminder that relief is always possible. The practice also requires patience. Generational wounds are deep, and healing them is not instant. But even small steps matter. Each time you breathe consciously into the pain of your lineage, you lighten the weight a little. Over time, these small acts accumulate, creating a profound shift. Tonglen for generational wounds cultivates humility. It reminds you that you are part of a vast continuum, shaped by those who came before and shaping those who will come after. This perspective softens ego further, reducing the illusion of separateness. You see yourself as a link in a chain, with the power to change the direction of that chain. As the night deepens, let your breath carry this awareness. Breathing in, acknowledge the suffering carried silently by your family. Breathing out, send them peace, forgiveness, and release. Feel the burden lighten, not just for you, but for the whole lineage. With each breath, the chain of suffering is weakened, and the chain of compassion is strengthened. Tonglen shows that even inherited wounds can be transformed. What was once passed down as pain can be transmuted into wisdom and love. This is not only personal healing, it is ancestral healing, collective healing. And in this practice, you become both the recipient of compassion and its source. The breath makes no distinction. It simply flows, connecting past, present, and future in one act of release. To practice Tonglen for generational wounds is to step into a role of healer for your lineage. You do not erase the past, but you change its weight. You do not carry the wound forward, but you send compassion instead. In doing so, you honor the struggles of those who came before, and you gift those who come after with a lighter inheritance. This is the gift of Tonglen, to turn even the heaviest suffering into compassion, to breathe relief into the silence of generations, and to transform inherited pain into a source of strength for the path ahead. When the practice of Tonglen begins to soften ancestral burdens, a profound recognition arises. The pain you carried was never only yours, yet within your own life, there are patterns that repeat like unbroken circles. Certain emotions return again and again, almost as if reborn in different forms. Anger may fade only to reappear with new faces. Fear may dissolve for a time before resurfacing. Longing may take new shapes, but never seem to end. These loops are not accidents, they are samsara, lived in the inner world. Just as beings are said to wander through cycles of birth and death, emotions too cycle endlessly until awareness interrupts the chain. Samsara in emotions means that suffering is not only about what happens once, but about the way the mind repeats its own dramas. You may notice that every time you are criticized, the same storm rises. Every time love is withheld, the same ache returns. It is as if each event is not new, but a continuation of an old story. Without seeing this, you live as though trapped in a wheel, reacting the same way over and over, expecting different outcomes, but receiving the same pain. Recognizing this cycle is the first step toward freedom. The Buddha described samsara as fueled by craving, aversion, and ignorance. In emotional life, craving appears as clinging to pleasure or validation, aversion as pushing away discomfort or pain, and ignorance as the failure to see impermanence clearly. These three forces drive the wheel of emotional rebirth. Each time craving, aversion, or ignorance dominates, the cycle turns again. Anger is born, fades, and is born again. Fear arises, subsides, and arises again. Desire flares, quiets, and flares again. To liberate from these cycles, you must first become aware of their recurrence. This requires mindfulness not only of isolated emotions, but of patterns over time. When anger comes, notice how familiar it feels. Trace it back to past moments when the same anger appeared. Recognize that it is not new, it is part of a cycle. By naming the cycle, you begin to step outside of it. Awareness creates distance. The anger is no longer an absolute truth, but a recurring wave. The body often reveals these cycles before the mind does. Perhaps grief always arrives with heaviness in the chest, or fear always tightens the stomach. These somatic signatures are like footprints of samsara in the body. By paying attention to them, you can recognize the cycle earlier, before it fully takes over. In that early recognition lies the chance to respond differently. One method to break these cycles is to apply the practice of noting. When a familiar emotion arises, instead of being swept away, you mentally note it: anger, fear, longing. This simple act shifts the mind from identification to observation. You are no longer anger itself. You are the awareness noticing anger. This disrupts the cycle by removing its fuel. Another method is to reflect on impermanence in the midst of the emotion. When sadness grips, remember that it has come before and passed, and it will pass again. This recognition loosens the belief that the current emotion is eternal. The cycle depends on the illusion of permanence. Seeing through that illusion weakens its hold. Compassion is also essential. When you recognize recurring emotions, it is easy to judge yourself. Why am I here again? Haven't I grown past this? But judgment only strengthens the cycle, adding another layer of suffering. Instead, meet the recurrence with compassion. This is a deep pattern. It takes time. May I be patient. May I be free. Compassion softens the cycle, making space for transformation. Buddhist teachings describe the wheel of samsara with 6 realms, each representing different states of suffering. The realms of gods, demigods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings. These realms can be seen as metaphors for emotional states. Pride reflects the god realm, envy the demigod realm, desire the hungry ghost realm, anger the hell realm, ignorance the animal realm, and mixed human emotions the human realm. Throughout a single day, you may pass through many of these realms internally. Recognizing them shows how samsara is not only cosmic but also psychological. Liberation begins by refusing to spin the wheel unconsciously. Each time you meet a recurring emotion with mindfulness, compassion, and clarity, you weaken the cycle. Over time, what once felt inevitable begins to dissolve. Anger that once ruled you becomes a brief visitor. Fear that once paralyzed you becomes a passing sensation. Longing that once consumed you becomes an opportunity to reflect on deeper needs. Meditation is the most direct training for this. Sitting quietly, you watch emotions rise and fall without feeding them. At first, the mind will chase after each one, but gradually it learns to rest. The cycles reveal themselves clearly. Irritation becomes boredom, boredom becomes restlessness, restlessness becomes distraction, and then the cycle repeats. By observing without reacting, you begin to see the mechanics of samsara. You see how the wheel turns, and in seeing, you are no longer trapped. Breaking emotional cycles also requires changing conditions. The Buddha taught that everything arises from conditions, and emotions are no different. If you repeatedly place yourself in environments that trigger the same wounds, the cycles will continue. Part of liberation is consciously shifting conditions, choosing healthier relationships, cultivating supportive habits, engaging in practices that nourish rather than deplete. Changing conditions weakens the fuel of recurring emotions. Reflection on karma is helpful here. Each time you react in the same old way, you reinforce the cycle, planting seeds for it to return. Each time you respond differently, even in a small way, you plant seeds for freedom. Over time, these small choices accumulate, and the old patterns lose power. The cycle of rebirth in emotions begins to slow. Silence, as explored before, also supports this process. In silence, cycles become clearer. Without the distraction of constant speech or activity, the recurring patterns rise to the surface. Though uncomfortable, this clarity is a gift. It allows you to see what must be released. Generational aspects also play a role. Many emotional cycles are not only personal but inherited. Recognizing this helps reduce shame. You are not flawed for repeating these patterns. You are carrying echoes of those before you. Through awareness and compassion, you can interrupt the cycle, offering healing not only for yourself, but for your lineage. Ultimately, liberation from samsara in emotions does not mean never feeling anger, fear, or longing again. It means not being bound by them. Emotions will arise, but they no longer dictate your life. You can feel anger without hatred, fear without paralysis, longing without despair. You experience them fully and let them pass, like clouds moving across the sky. As you rest now, reflect on the cycles in your own heart. Notice which emotions return again and again. Recognize that they are not new, that they are part of a wheel. With awareness, compassion, and practice, you can step off that wheel. The cycles of emotional rebirth need not continue endlessly. Liberation is possible, not in some distant life, but here, in this very moment, with this very breath. This is the teaching of samsara in emotions, that the loops of suffering are not eternal prisons, but patterns that can be seen, softened, and released. To recognize the cycle is to weaken it. To meet it with compassion is to transform it. To live with awareness is to step into freedom. And in that freedom, you no longer wander endlessly. You rest in clarity, peace, and the quiet joy of being free. When the cycles of emotional samsara become clearer, the heart begins to soften. You see anger not as an enemy but as a teacher, fear not as a punishment but as a messenger, longing not as a curse but as a call to deeper awareness. In that softening, compassion naturally grows. Yet here lies another challenge: how to express compassion without losing yourself. Many confuse kindness with self-erasure, generosity with neglect of one's own needs, compassion with people-pleasing. But Buddhist compassion is not about abandoning your own truth. It is about loving fully while standing firmly. It is warmth with wisdom, kindness with boundaries, a balance that prevents compassion from turning into harm. True compassion arises from clarity, not compulsion. People-pleasing often comes from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being worthy. The actions may look similar on the surface, but the roots are different. In people-pleasing, you give because you are afraid not to. In compassion, you give because your heart is open, and you know it is appropriate. One drains you, the other nourishes both you and the other. Recognizing this difference is crucial for liberation. Boundaries are not barriers against love. They are the structures that allow love to remain healthy. Without them, compassion becomes enabling. You may end up supporting harmful behaviors, tolerating abuse, or sacrificing your well-being in the name of kindness. The Buddha's teaching of the middle way applies here. Too rigid, and you become cold. Too porous, and you become overwhelmed. The balance lies in discernment, offering kindness where it can nurture growth while saying no when it feeds harm. To practice compassion without enabling, you must first know your own motivations. Before acting, pause and ask, is this coming from love or from fear? Am I giving because I truly wish to relieve suffering, or because I am afraid of disapproval? This self-inquiry is a form of mindfulness. It ensures that your actions arise from clarity, not compulsion. Another key is understanding the difference between alleviating suffering and protecting someone from the consequences of their actions. Compassion does not mean shielding others from reality. Sometimes, allowing someone to face the results of their choices is the most compassionate act, because it gives them the chance to grow. Enabling, by contrast, keeps them stuck. For example, giving endless money to someone trapped in addiction may feel kind, but it prevents them from confronting their pain. Compassion would instead mean offering support for recovery, even if it means saying no to requests that perpetuate harm. This discernment requires courage. Many fear that setting boundaries makes them selfish or unkind. But selfishness arises from attachment to self-interest, while boundaries arise from wisdom about what supports growth. Saying no to harm is not rejection, it is love expressed in a deeper form. The Buddha himself set boundaries, refusing to engage in fruitless arguments or to indulge harmful behavior. His compassion was steady, but it was not indulgent. To cultivate this balance, it helps to practice metta, not only for others, but for yourself. When you direct loving kindness inward, you recognize your own worthiness of care. This prevents compassion from turning into self-neglect. From this foundation, you can offer love outwardly without draining yourself. Self-compassion is the root that sustains compassion for others. Without it, your giving will eventually collapse into resentment. Another practice is to develop equanimity, the quality of balance in the face of joy and sorrow, gain and loss, praise and blame. Equanimity allows you to offer compassion without being swept away by the emotions of others. You can be present with their suffering without drowning in it, supportive without carrying what is not yours. This prevents compassion fatigue and ensures that your kindness remains steady over time. Compassion without enabling also requires honesty. Often, people-pleasing involves telling others what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. True compassion speaks truth gently but firmly. It does not manipulate to avoid discomfort. It trusts that honesty, even when difficult, is ultimately more healing than false comfort. This is why right speech in Buddhism emphasizes both kindness and truth. Words must be both, not one at the expense of the other. In relationships, this practice transforms dynamics. Instead of constantly bending to keep peace, you begin to engage from a place of authenticity. You give when it is nourishing, and you decline when it is harmful. Others may resist at first, especially if they are accustomed to your people-pleasing. But over time, authentic compassion builds deeper trust. People know that when you give, it is real, not coerced. Compassion without enabling also extends to how you treat your own inner patterns. Sometimes the one you enable most is yourself, indulging harmful habits because you mistake them for comfort. Here too, compassion means setting boundaries. Meeting your craving with kindness does not mean feeding it endlessly. It means understanding its root and guiding yourself toward healthier expression. In this way, boundaries are not only external but internal. The practice can be deepened through meditation on compassion itself. Visualize someone you care about who is suffering. Wish them peace, but also reflect what action would truly support their well-being. Then visualize yourself and ask the same. In this dual reflection, you train the mind to see that compassion must be balanced, that love must be both tender and wise. Stories from Buddhist tradition often illustrate this principle. One tale tells of a monk who encountered a thief. Instead of fighting or indulging him, the monk offered him food but refused to allow further theft. The act was compassionate, addressing the thief's hunger, but it also set a boundary against harm. This is compassion without enabling, meeting suffering without feeding its destructive form. Modern psychology echoes this. Research on boundaries shows that those who maintain them are more capable of genuine empathy. People who overextend themselves in attempts to please often burn out, leading to resentment. But those who balance kindness with self-care sustain compassion longer and more deeply. Buddhism anticipated this truth. Compassion must be guided by wisdom to remain whole. In daily life, opportunities to practice arise constantly. A friend asks for help beyond your capacity. A family member repeats destructive patterns. A colleague seeks validation through constant demands. In each case, you can pause, breathe, and ask, what action here is truly compassionate? Sometimes it will be saying yes, other times it will be saying no. Both can be expressions of love, if rooted in clarity. The ultimate aim is not to withdraw from others, but to engage more truthfully. Compassion without enabling fosters healthier relationships, greater resilience, and deeper authenticity. It prevents the exhaustion of endless giving without replenishment and creates space where love can flourish without distortion. As you rest now, let this understanding settle. Compassion is not weakness, and boundaries are not cruelty. When guided by wisdom, compassion flows freely without drowning you or others. It heals without harming, nurtures without indulging, and sustains without exhaustion. This is the strength of Buddhist compassion, steady, balanced, and deeply liberating. When compassion grows strong enough to hold firm boundaries, it becomes clear that suffering cannot be healed only at the surface. Setting limits protects your heart. But the question remains, why do certain wounds feel so persistent? Why do some emotions return with such intensity, no matter how much kindness you bring to them? To answer this, the Buddha pointed to a teaching at the very core of his wisdom-dependent origination. It reveals that every experience, including pain, arises through a chain of causes and conditions. By tracing an emotional wound back through this chain, you can uncover its subtle roots in craving and ignorance, and only then can the cycle be released. Dependent origination teaches that nothing exists in isolation. Every feeling, thought, and reaction arises because of prior conditions. An emotional wound does not appear suddenly, fully formed. It is the result of a series of links: contact, sensation, perception, craving, clinging, becoming. By examining these links carefully, you can understand not just what you feel, but how it was constructed moment by moment. This awareness dismantles the illusion that your pain is an unchangeable fact. It shows that suffering is a process, and what is built through conditions can also be unbuilt through wisdom. Take the example of rejection. At first, there is contact, the moment someone turns away or withholds affection. This contact gives rise to sensation, a sharpness in the chest, a contraction in the stomach. Then comes perception. The mind interprets the sensation as abandonment, recalling past moments of being unwanted. Next arises craving, the desperate wish for acceptance, for proof of worth. From craving comes clinging, the stories the mind repeats endlessly: I am not enough, I will always be alone. That clinging solidifies into becoming, the sense of self identified with rejection, shaping how you relate to others in the future. What felt like a single wound is revealed as a chain of events. Seeing this chain with clarity loosens its grip. Ignorance is the beginning of the chain. Not ignorance as stupidity, but as misunderstanding. At the root of every wound lies ignorance of impermanence, ignorance of interconnection, ignorance of the true nature of self. Believing that the self is fixed, you take every rejection as proof of your permanent unworthiness. Believing that feelings are absolute, you cling to sadness as if it will never pass. Believing that happiness must come from outside, you chase after approval endlessly. These misunderstandings feed craving, and craving drives the cycle of suffering. By practicing mindfulness, you begin to interrupt the chain. When contact occurs, you pause before interpretation. You notice the raw sensation without rushing to label it. When craving arises, you recognize it as desire rather than truth. When clinging begins, you observe the stories spinning and choose not to feed them. Each interruption weakens the cycle. Over time, the wound loses its solidity because the conditions that sustained it are no longer present. This tracing back requires patience. The mind often wants quick answers, but dependent origination asks for careful observation. You may need to sit with a painful memory and ask, what came before this? What was I feeling? What thought arose? What desire followed? Slowly, the chain becomes visible. This process is not about analysis in the ordinary sense, but about experiential insight. The more you practice, the more naturally you see the links in daily life. The practice also reveals compassion for yourself and others. When you see that even harmful actions arise from chains of causes, you understand that people are not monsters by nature. They are caught in cycles of ignorance and craving, just as you are. This understanding does not excuse harm, but places it in context, opening the door to forgiveness and wise response. Healing through dependent origination also highlights the importance of wise attention. What you attend to strengthens. If you focus on the wound alone, it deepens. If you focus on the chain that creates the wound, you begin to dismantle it. Wise attention means not feeding unhelpful stories, not indulging destructive craving, not ignoring impermanence. It means directing awareness where it can untie the knot rather than tighten it. Meditation on dependent origination can be practiced in stages. Begin with awareness of contact, each sound, sight, or thought that arises. Notice how contact leads to sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then watch how the mind interprets these sensations, creating perception. Stay present as craving arises, the wish for more pleasure, less pain, or escape from neutrality. Notice the clinging that follows, the identification with the desire, the story of self built around it. Finally, observe how all of this solidifies into becoming actions, speech, and self-identity. With each stage seen clearly, the grip weakens. The Buddha compared this process to a fire fueled by wood. If the fuel is removed at any link, the fire goes out. In the same way, if ignorance is replaced with understanding, craving replaced with presence, clinging replaced with letting go, the fire of suffering cannot continue to burn. This understanding also changes how you relate to trauma. Instead of seeing trauma as an unchangeable scar, you see it as the result of repeated cycles of contact, sensation, craving, and clinging. This does not deny the reality of pain, but reframes it as a process. By meeting the process with mindfulness, you can loosen its hold, transforming trauma into wisdom. Modern psychology parallels this teaching. Cognitive behavioral therapy identifies how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors reinforce each other in cycles. Breaking the cycle requires awareness and new responses. The Buddha described this dynamic centuries ago in dependent origination. Both traditions point to the same truth. Suffering is maintained by patterns, and patterns can be changed. Another aspect of this practice is seeing the role of desire in subtle forms. Not only craving for pleasure, but craving for identity, craving for certainty, craving for recognition. These subtle cravings often hide beneath wounds. For example, fear of failure may be rooted in craving for a fixed self-image of success. Anxiety about relationships may be rooted in craving for permanent love. By identifying these subtle desires, you bring them into awareness, where they can no longer control you unconsciously. The practice also shows the liberating power of letting go. Each time you release a craving or a story of self, the chain weakens. Letting go does not mean apathy, it means trusting the natural flow of impermanence. You no longer need to force reality into your expectations. You allow joy and sorrow to come and go, knowing they are part of the same chain. In this letting go, wounds heal not by erasing the past, but by no longer being bound to it. As the night deepens and the body rests, let this teaching sink into your heart. Every wound you carry is not a fixed object, but a chain of causes. Every emotion, every story, every reaction is conditioned. By tracing them back, you see their roots. By meeting them with mindfulness, you cut the chain. What once felt permanent dissolves into flow, Healing through dependent origination is not quick or easy, but it is profound. It transforms suffering from a prison into a path. Each wound becomes an invitation to look deeper, to uncover ignorance, to release craving, and to awaken to the freedom that lies beneath. In this way, the very patterns that once bound you become the keys to liberation. When the chain of dependent origination is traced, and the roots of craving and ignorance are exposed, the mind becomes clearer. Yet clarity alone is not always enough. Emotions, even when understood, often linger in the body. They create heaviness in the chest, tension in the shoulders, restlessness in the breath. Insight may free the mind, but the body still carries the residue. This is why practice must also be lived physically. Among the simplest yet most overlooked methods is walking meditation. The act of placing one foot in front of the other with full awareness has the power to ground emotions, to reset energy, and to bring balance where thought alone cannot reach. Walking meditation is often underestimated because it appears so ordinary. People expect transformation to come from silence on a cushion or profound philosophical reflection. Yet the Buddha himself taught walking as one of the 4 noble postures of meditation, equal to sitting, standing, and lying down. Walking with awareness is not a lesser practice. It is a doorway into presence that connects mind and body, earth and breath, movement and stillness. When emotions feel stuck, walking meditation provides release. The steady rhythm of steps engages the body, giving restless energy a channel. Instead of turning inward endlessly, the mind meets the sensation of each foot touching the ground. The weight transfers, the muscles shift, the breath aligns with the movement. Slowly, the emotional turbulence that once felt unbearable begins to dissolve into rhythm. The body becomes an anchor, reminding you that you are here, in this moment, not trapped in the past or future. Walking meditation is particularly effective for emotions that create agitation, anxiety, frustration, restlessness. Sitting still during such states may intensify them, like pressing on a wound. But walking channels the energy without repression. The body moves, the mind observes, and the storm begins to settle. Each step becomes both an outlet and a return to presence. The practice begins simply. Choose a path, short or long, and walk slowly, with attention on each step. The focus is not on reaching a destination but on experiencing the movement itself. You can coordinate breath with steps, inhaling for a few, exhaling for a few. This natural synchronization steadies both body and mind. Over time, emotions that felt overwhelming begin to loosen. What was stuck begins to flow. Grounding is another gift of walking meditation. Emotional pain often lifts you out of the body into spirals of thought. You replay conversations, rehearse arguments, ruminate on wounds. Walking interrupts this. The pressure of feet against the earth, the sensation of balance shifting with each step, draws awareness back into the body. This grounding reconnects you with reality beyond thought. The earth beneath your feet becomes a teacher, steady, supportive, unchanging beneath constant movement. There is also a symbolic power in walking meditation. Each step becomes a letting go. With every exhale, you release a little of the weight carried in the heart. With every inhale, you take in stability and clarity. The forward motion mirrors inner progress, moving through suffering instead of being paralyzed by it. Even in the smallest space, walking becomes a pilgrimage of healing. This practice also connects to the teaching of impermanence. As you walk, each step arises and passes. No step can be repeated, no moment recaptured. Walking meditation trains the mind to accept this truth, not as theory but as experience. Emotions, like steps, arise and pass. Nothing is fixed. This embodied realization helps dissolve attachment to pain. Modern research supports these insights. Studies show that mindful walking reduces stress, regulates emotions, and improves overall well-being. The physical act of walking stimulates circulation, balances the nervous system, and promotes calm. Combined with mindfulness, it becomes not just exercise, but medicine for the heart and mind. One of the strengths of walking meditation is its accessibility. You do not need special conditions or long hours. It can be practiced in a hallway, a garden, or even on the way to work. Every step can become an act of awareness. This makes it especially helpful for those whose emotions erupt in daily life, outside formal meditation. A short mindful walk can reset the mind in moments of stress, preventing cycles of reactivity. Walking also cultivates patience. Unlike rushing to a goal, walking meditation slows the pace deliberately. It invites you to rest in each step without hurry. For those caught in the constant drive of modern life, this slowness is radical. It teaches that healing does not require racing forward, but arriving fully in the present. Another benefit lies in the integration of breath and movement. When emotions are intense, the breath often becomes shallow or erratic. Walking meditation restores its rhythm. Inhalation and exhalation align naturally with the steps, creating harmony between inner and outer movement. This balance soothes the nervous system and opens space for clarity to return. The practice also nurtures gratitude. As you walk slowly, you notice details usually missed: the texture of the ground, the play of light, the sensation of air. These small observations awaken appreciation. Gratitude shifts the emotional field, making room for joy even in the midst of pain. In Buddhist tradition, monks often practiced walking meditation between long periods of sitting. They knew that stillness and movement must balance each other. Too much stillness can stagnate, too much movement can scatter. Walking bridges the two. It refreshes the mind while keeping awareness steady. For emotional healing, this balance is essential. Walking meditation can be adapted for specific emotional states. For anger, walk with awareness of each step, softening the ground beneath you, releasing heat with every exhale. For sadness, walk gently, allowing the rhythm to cradle the heart, breathing in comfort and breathing out heaviness. For anxiety, walk slowly, grounding each step firmly, reminding yourself of stability in the present moment. Each adaptation tailors the practice to the wound that needs healing. There is also a communal dimension. Walking meditation practiced with others creates shared silence and presence. The rhythm of many feet moving together generates a collective field of calm. In difficult times, walking in community can magnify healing, showing that you are not alone in your suffering. The shared steps weave connection without words. Walking meditation also supports insight. As the mind settles into rhythm, thoughts quiet, and deeper understanding arises naturally. Problems that seem tangled may loosen. Emotional knots may reveal their roots. Unlike forced thinking, insight in walking meditation arises organically, like clarity after a storm.